Welcome to ULI's Real Estate Outlook for 2015.
The foreign investors are all over the place. It's just really remarkable the amount of capital that's coming in. And I think that what we're seeing, the tip-off to what's going on now occurred back in 2011 when the U.S. long-term credit rating was downgraded.
How do we sort of deal with some of this infrastructure? I'm not talking about the 9,000 potholes we had to navigate to come from Westchester County to Midtown, but just crumbling infrastructure. I mean, the story, everybody's tweeting about Metro North or, problems with the subway system. I mean, these infrastructure is just all old, and LaGuardia Airport vice president called it a bad bus terminal. I mean, we clearly have infrastructure challenges. How does the real estate industry, who basically is providing services to capital markets and providing space and housing and so forth, does the real estate industry have to play a role in infrastructure because we're in it? The real estate industry is in it with government.
Look, I think you're going to have more public-private partnerships in that area, and that's the only way it's going to really move the infrastructure. The funny thing is about those potholes in Metro North is it's probably the exact thing that's helping urbanization, because nobody wants to have to navigate all those potholes or be delayed or have their trains canceled and canceled and canceled. Ultimately, though, for our subways, it's a huge issue. You look at this winter, they had to have those icebreaker subways, machines going through the subways because of all the leaking down in that was causing huge problems. We have to do something. The average Chinese investor arrives here in New York, and you try to show them a 30-year-old building, and they're like, oh, no, old. What they think of our actual roads and our subways and our ability to handle what's going to be power problems and the like is really... we're way past time, but it's going to be just so frighteningly expensive to afford.
How do you decide on a location?
Yeah. Well, I think for us, obviously, we have a lot of locations and each one has its own personality, but I think the fundamentals are pretty simple in that, people who are at work for a long time need to be able to get out of the building in the middle of the day and find a great place to eat lunch, or obviously on their way in, a great place to have coffee. Or, for that, whatever, 10:30 a.m. break to be able to get out. And I can say, being at 222 Broadway, the speed at which that neighborhood has evolved has been pretty profound in terms of the way that it serves our members. When we first came down there, I think everyone was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, why would you choose this building? No one wants to be in this location. There's nothing around there. But you can see with the energy that comes to the area, things actually transform really quickly. And so while there's still not enough coffee, there's not enough, the one thing I should add is also nightlife after work. The biggest complaint right now that we have from people in our building is that, downtown doesn't have enough places to go after work. So anyone who owns property down there, you should be leasing to, local restaurateurs and bringing more of that to the neighborhood. But I think it's pretty simple stuff, but I think authentic, experiences are what people are looking for. Certainly the, national chain fast casual stuff is okay, but I think that people feel excited about connecting with local vendors. And so that's something that if we can help direct the evolution of a neighborhood, that's often a part of it. I don't think it's complicated, but I think it is something that makes a big difference, and it when you see it. When a neighborhood has life when you walk out of the building, and that's a huge benefit.
I ask every tech tenant or just the tenant in general, why are they coming to our building? Why do they want to be here? And the first thing they all say is recruiting. And they want to attract the best talent. And that's really what sets certain buildings apart from others, is the ability for certain tenants to be able to recruit the best talent to then grow their base. Because the real estate is just secondary to them versus growing their business. And without talent, they can't grow their business.
Just to add something, I think one of the things that we found is that, the sort of youngest generation of talented people right now can really go wherever they want, especially tech talent. In New York, there's so little that great people in technology have their choice of jobs and they can move around from job to job if they want to. And so, I think the whole package of compensation, goes far beyond, money. It goes into company culture and sort of being a part of something that's making a contribution to the big picture. And when it comes to real estate, I mean, I really think there is a shift in terms of people's appreciation of value. Landlords, and nothing against our partners, but going back to the anaerobic digester, which I think is the term for the thing that can recycle food and create basically a material that is like a powder that anyway, that thing can probably make more of a difference to a 25-year-old tech employee than like a $3 million marble lobby. You know what I mean? And so it's like, those are the kind of things that I think will have an impact going forward. When you look at, the Googles of the world and the way that they're redesigning their workplaces, they're really looking at it from the ground up as a totally different experience. And I think that that's kind of the same kind of thinking that we need from property owners, is to really reevaluate what people think is important in a building. And so I think, as we go forward from here, and as we're looking at how to attract talent to our buildings and to our city, I mean, I think we have to rethink in some way from top to bottom what the experience is that people are having. And there are a lot of simple things, but there are also there are still places for innovation, I think, for sure.
Is your portfolio geographically centered, or is it pretty diverse?
So we see a lot of interesting deals. And again, these things are probably like the most liquid form of real estate. I mean, it's 10:25 now. If I wanted to sell a couple buildings, I could call people and probably have offers by like 2:30 this afternoon. And they'd close in maybe 45 days. So it's a fairly liquid. And we saw that in the downturn as well. We can't buy a one-off building someplace unless we really want to devote a flag, plant a flag in a market. So right now we have a lot in the East Village. We're closing on a portfolio that gives us scale on the Upper East Side and in Murray Hill. We'd like to be buying on the West Side. We haven't been able to find anything that kind of gives us enough scale there to buy more. We have a good holding in Astoria, and then we have a bunch in Brooklyn Heights and a few other areas in Brooklyn. So we look at it and say we want to just continue expanding. And the good thing about having the big mass is, we bought a $4 million building last year in the East Village because it was right between two other buildings. And so it gave us the ability to do a very small, flow-in transaction that we probably wouldn't have done otherwise.
Chris, you and I were talking yesterday about rents, and your portfolio to a large degree is Midtown South, downtown, certainly not exclusively. And you were saying how you're recently you actually able to get more rent for a Park Avenue South building, I think, or Chelsea building perhaps, than you were in a traditional Midtown location. And that 5 years ago would have been unheard of. So what's the trend there?
Well, I mean, I think as everybody knows, the trend is is sort of moving downtown, Midtown South, Chelsea. I was joking with Jay because we signed a lease at 430 Park about a year ago, and we were paying $70 a foot. We recently, or 2 years ago, we bought the old Barney's Warehouse buildings on 17th Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, 280,000 square feet, and we did a massive gut renovation, all new systems, everything, and we leased 220,000 square feet to Twitter for their East Coast headquarters, and they're paying us $72 a foot. So I laughed that Park Avenue gets less rent than 17th Street on a mid-block. But I mean, I think that's the trend that we're seeing. We've been lucky enough to, be able to have bought some great assets in the Midtown South area and the sort of the Times Square South, Penn Station area as well. And we're just seeing tremendous rent growth there. As everybody reads, Manhattan is sort of shifting to the west. And I also joke about Park Avenue to the extent that, in 5 years it's going to be sort of irrelevant.
Yeah, I just think that as a whole, we definitely have an affordability issue as a city. And I think that, if you look at, in the city, if I look at kind of where our companies chose to focus, I kind of say we try to focus between the 20s, where we're not trying to be in the super high end and we're not trying to be in the super low end. But, the number one thing that I learned from kind of the last recession, I think, being young in this business, you're always trying to learn from the things that happen. is that you really have to focus on just base affordability for people, and if you can't produce product that achieves the objectives at the pricing that a market can take, then it's no good.
Are we really seeing a fundamental sort of shift in definition of location? So, Chris, your point about Park Avenue, are people really coming to reevaluate Park Avenue? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Will it emerge sort of unscathed as still Park Avenue, or will it emerge as something completely different in the next, say, 10 years?
Well, I mean, I think Park Avenue is Park Avenue, and it's the spine, and it had always been, Park Avenue is Grand Central is at the bottom of Park Avenue, and all the executives used to work up in Connecticut and Westchester, and so it was convenient, and that's sort of why Park Avenue developed how it developed. And now the guys that are running businesses are living in Brooklyn, in Long Island City, and Tribeca, and so that's not appropriate anymore. And the employees that are working in all of these businesses are living in New Jersey, in Brooklyn and Queens. So again, that line of commutation is not as appropriate or as important. So that's why you're seeing things change. So I think in New York City, I think location doesn't matter anymore. I think there is no location that isn't great. I'm looking at a big, large repositioning of an office building way on the west side. And we struggle in our office. Well, is it too far away from transportation? Well, there's 4,000 residential units that have just been built and being built right around there. So if you can't work there, why would you live there? I think Uber's changed everything. I think it's changed the way people get to work and how they get to work, and sort of taken that issue out of a lot of minds. And again, now I think it's more, especially for the new TAMI tenants, it's not so much location as product. I think the product is driving where tenants want to be. They want large floor plates. They want high ceilings. They want cool. They want brick. They want old school industrial feel, and that's why Jared is doing so well over. I mean, besides, everything else. But I mean, I think the product that you have is what people want.
I think that location does matter, but I think it's not as much on an absolute basis as it is really on a relative basis today. And I think that what we're finding, so the way we'll always look at office product, and we don't do a lot of it, but when we do office, we're always focused very bottom up. So I spend a lot of time with different companies really trying to understand what they're looking for, where their workforce comes from, and what they want. And so I think that the location really matters to these companies. I have some companies who will just be in Soho. Why will they be in Soho? Because that's where their employees want to be. Some companies, they'll just be in Brooklyn. Why do they want to be in Brooklyn? Because the CEO wants to ride his bike to work. Mm-hmm. So I think that the location will matter, but it's more kind of on an individual by individual basis. But the thing about New York that's really happened, and a lot of it goes to the credit of the last two administrations and the great job that they did making the city safer, and then stimulating a lot of businesses and creating new neighborhoods, is that if you're a CEO of a business and you lived in New York City, there's probably like maybe 3 neighborhoods that you would have lived in 20 years ago. Today, there's probably 25 neighborhoods that you could live in and be very, very comfortable. There are places for your kids to walk on the streets. There's places for your kids to go to school. There's places to get coffee. There's places to shop. And I think that redefines where a lot of these bigger and smaller businesses will be. I was talking with a broker who's very involved with the Brookfield Place retail, and somebody was saying, well, how did you get this tenant to go down there? Just totally shocked they were able to pull off. They said, well, the CEO's lived in Battery Park for the last 20 years, and so the CEO basically was comfortable with the area when a lot of people weren't, and once that tenant came, a lot of other people got familiar, and so. I think that the evolution of New York has really redefined. And I was telling Jay earlier, we've really seen that, the Upper East Side to a large degree has moved to the West Village. And then we see the people from the West Village who were there before all the luxury high rises move to the East Village, which is why the rents have grown so much in the East Village. And we're seeing the East Village people really moving out to maybe Astoria or to different parts of Brooklyn. And you're seeing just kind of the migratory trends that are happening. And the other thing that I think is just so incredibly significant now in New York that we really watch is, and that's why we're so bullish on Jersey City, is you have 100,000 jobs moving down to the World Trade Center. And, I think that area is very real now for really 2 reasons. One, you have a lot of the workforce coming from Brooklyn for a lot of these creative firms. And so from a transportation point of view, the World Trade Center is probably better than anything else in New York. What Grand Central used to be to Park Avenue, the transportation system now at the World Trade Center is 3 times as good.
But when the number 7 opens,
that'll be. And then, but then when you look at that area there, you've got all these jobs coming in, and then you also have Jersey City, which is going to be the only true place where people can afford to live. And so if I look at, if you're a younger analyst, you're paying your own rent, and you're working, in that downtown area, where can you rent an apartment? So you can pay $60 to $85 and live downtown. You can pay $100 and go to Tribeca, Soho. You can go to, you go to Brooklyn, but you're still paying $60 to $80 now with what it is. Or you go to Jersey City and pay $40 and have a phenomenal new construction building, great gym, great amenities. Look at Manhattan, and you'll jump on the PATH train, and you'll be in the World Trade Center in 6 minutes. So, ironically, after Jersey City, the next cheapest place we're finding people can live is the Upper East Side. And so it's very, very interesting to see the migratory trends of New York. And, by staying close to it, location does matter on a relative basis.
As the expression goes, as a real estate developer, if you want to make money, just follow the artists.
Yeah.
Right. Look at Soho, East Village, Chelsea.
But now the artists are
yeah.
craft brewers and artisanal coffee makers.
But the true traditional artists, started Soho, started the East Village. They're in Williamsburg. I mean, as they go, so does culture, and so does and all the retail follows. I mean, just if you look at the migration of the artists from the 70s. Every area they've been sort of transplanted to or displaced to has become hip and hot, and thus and therefore there go follows the residential.
Yeah, one friend of mine bought up this whole area in downtown Las Vegas where it was 10 blocks where you can't have gambling, and so I went out to visit, thinking he kept asking me and my wife to come out, and so I went out and say we're going to teach this guy who's a technology guy about real estate. And we get out there and we're in the guy's apartment. He's got 40 stickets on his wall, and each one says organic grocery, pet grooming, hot yoga, and I said a butcher shop. I said Tony, what are all these things? So well, this is what I need to build my community. And he says what I'm doing is I'm going to fund these 40 businesses, but my criteria can be that everyone has to be owner run. And so I want when you go to the coffee shop, the guy who's there every day knows your name, and he's the owner of the shop and he doesn't own anything else. And what I realize is that as real estate people, we think of development in terms of buildings, but building culture and community really happens with the people and the artisans and the businesses that you empower. And one person can't build a community. It really, as they say, takes a village. And I think that what we did in Dumbo Heights, right now it's good. You're going to see when the retail opens, it's going to be spectacular because. What we did is we said, look, we can afford to maybe take half the market rent in our retail space that we probably could get. But what that enabled us to do is really kind of pick the tenants that we wanted to deal with and really get people who we thought were like-minded and focused on our mission. Before Josh and Miguel were speaking on the panel, I've literally sat in a room with these guys for an hour debating which coffee shop we put in, which is a crazy, terribly bad use of all of our time. But, by getting it right, it really, they say, look, for all of, Miguel's members, for all of, Etsy's employees, they said, we want this environment to be important. And Josh, one of the things that him, Chad, Christina was very important to them about coming to that environment was they said, we want an environment where no tenant here is a cafeteria. And we said, well, that's great for us. Because they said, one of the things that I remember my friend Tony in Las Vegas said is he wanted to create a community where people can have as many serendipitous interactions as possible. And I think that for a lot of these people, creativity comes when you're interacting with other creative people. And so by making the retail, affordable, you can get, better tenants in. Those tenants can then afford to charge less for whatever it is that they're doing and make a profit, but also service the community. And it really encourages, people from all these different companies to be interacting with each other in that environment. So I think that the type of retail you have really can drive a lot of how the total experience is. And what we're finding is by putting in a lot of great, local entrepreneurs, we've got a guy who's going to open a bar there who's a Dumbo resident, and he's just very excited to do it. And we know he's going to be there every day. We know he's going to be into it, really, really making it great. And we're not going to build a community. We're going to put a lot of great people in place, and they're going to build a community.
And what that does eventually, that drives the rents upstairs. I mean, the rent that you're getting from the retail in an office building is 5 to 8% of the rent that you're getting for the entire building. And we do that all the time. So to the extent that you take less to put in a great tenant who's going to make the retail presence for your office building that much more enjoyable and that much more accretive and useful for the tenants, that's going to drive rents and drive the tenancy for the office building. So it's really, it's a compounding effect.
I think people in forums like this, especially the one that I moderated, I think people hear the term TAMI, they hear Chinese investors, they don't understand it. So having the opportunity to gain insight with people who are actually in the trenches and doing deals with these foreign investors who are building these new type of businesses in the tech bubble and emerging trends, I think is very important.
Well, I mean, they're really great from the perspective that every single time I come to an event like this, I get, multiple connections and multiple offers as a result of it. And a lot of times I'm surprised by, we're out in the market, but yet still every event like this, someone comes in and says, I had never heard of you before. I have this great building in some place. And so I don't think I've been a part of an event where that hasn't happened. And especially ULI, obviously, becomes really valuable from the perspective of just connecting with people who are thinking about things in a sophisticated way and trying to put together, deals, developments that actually are more than just, say, a one-off building, but usually have a greater sort of strategic perspective, and that's great.